Today I'm taking a look at the 2024 Toyota GR86 Trueno Edition. And this Trueno Edition is a limited run homage to the classic AE86 Sprinter Trueno that was popularized by the Japanese anime series Initial D. And it bears mentioning that nothing bearing the Trueno name was ever sold here. The version of the AE86 that we got was marketed as the Corolla GTS, and it's actually taken me through a lot of outtakes to not call this a Corolla, because my mind keeps going back to that, even though this has nothing to do with a Corolla. And even though we never had this name here, it's kind of a fun homage to the surprisingly huge cultural impact that that show has had, both on the car world as a whole, of people my age who got into that show and got into cars like this, got into Toyota performance as a whole because of that show and its impact and what it did to kind of popularize that car. And it's manifesting here in this special edition. And it's just kind of a fun nod. So visually, what Toyota has done to differentiate this from the regular GR86 is we have obviously this graphics package that's kind of a nod to the panda color scheme on the classic AE86 from Initial D. It's available in either this red or white, and for the life of me, I can't imagine why this press car is red. Everyone's looking for the panda. Everyone wants the white panda GR86, but this looks cool. So we got the graphics package, we got a blacked out hood, we have a large color keyed duckbill spoiler, we have a glossy finish on these wheels as opposed to the matte finish on the regular premium cars, and we have a two-tone cabin with a bunch of red accents on the doors and on the seats and on the steering wheel, and a special weighted shift knob. But the changes go beyond cosmetics for this car. It's not just a visual tribute to the car from Initial D. So what Toyota's Gazoo racing department has done to kind of spice this car up to match the visual punch it has new dampers from Sachs in Germany, and we also have bigger brakes and 4-pot calipers in the front, 2-pot in the rear. Other than that, the spring tuning is the same, the sway bars are the same, nothing's changed under the hood, but basically new shocks, new brakes. And that kind of brings it in line with the Mazda Miata's Sport package, given that it has Bilstein shocks, also from a renowned German manufacturer, and big Brembo brakes. So I'm not expecting the effect of this to be totally transformative, just a minor tweak to kind of enliven the driving experience. So let's go for a ride and see what this is like. Before I get started on the drive, I want to spell out some of the negative stuff first about this car. And this is something that I mentioned with the Z4 video that I did a little while ago, is how some OEMs bake in a lot of artificial throttle smoothing or rev hang, or through one means or another, interfering with the linkage between your foot and what the engine does. And unfortunately, this car does that kind of bad. And I can show you it here. I'm going to give the throttle a quick kick like that, and the revs lazily go up to 2 grand and then very slowly walk their way back down. And that's only just now, right there, back down at idle. And I really don't like that they've baked in so much delay on the low side of the throttle response, because it makes the car tricky to drive smooth. It's something you got to pay attention to because it's not natural. I'm very fussy about this sort of thing. It's important to me that a car feels right, feels organic, and this car, especially at low speeds, doesn't. It's just kind of frustrating, and it's really irritating for me to sit in traffic in this car. And it's kind of silly that they've done this, because outside of that, and this gross engine noise, this is one of the best handling chassis you can buy at any price. This is incredible. This car handles so good. Like, they have made such a good sports car. Like, the 86 was already a great sports car. Its whole mission statement was to be a inexpensive, simple performance coupe that focused on going back to basics, right? Less weight, less nannies, less things getting in the way. Just focus on a good driver's car that prioritizes handling well first. And that's why the first 86, 10-ish years ago now, came out of the box with kind of garbage tires. It was a deliberate intention from Toyota to kind of give the car low limits so that it had more playful transient behavior. Right? A lot of modern performance cars now are really fast and really heavy and have a ton of mechanical grip to make up for it. And Toyota wanted to get away from that. So they put skinny, rinky-dink, low rolling resistance hockey puck tires on it so that the car could actually understeer and oversteer and drift and be playful and dance and actually have approachable transient handling characteristics that weren't scary to get up to, right? If you go play with, say, a Corvette, you got to be going really, really fast to start exploring the limits of that chassis. And what the 86 and the BRZ did was bring that way, 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 way down to a point where a normal person could get into that car, learn to drive it, and learn to drive it fast, and then apply that to other cars. Because this is such a good, basic, classic sports car formula. Front engine, rear drive, limited slip differential, manual transmission, good balance, low weight, tight reflexes. That was what the original Trueno 86 in Japan was all about. That was what the Corolla GTS we got here, which was more or less the same car, was all about. And that's what this car is about. And the tweaks that Toyota have done with this, with the new Sachs dampers and with the new Brembo brakes, I think they don't transform the car. It's not a big leap, but it's a subtle tweak that just makes the car that much more effective and that much more satisfying. Toyota says the dampers have been tuned to make the car feel more stable, and if I'm being quite honest, I haven't spent a ton of time in the base 86, so I can't really speak to the effect that they've had. But what I can say is that I have driven a ton of cars, and this is one of the best handling ones I have ever driven. It is absolutely phenomenal. The balance is fantastic. It is excellent at telegraphing what the front end is doing when the front wheels are starting to break away, and they do so very naturally and very organically. It's very good at letting you feel what the rear end is doing when the rear end is starting to slip and break away. And it encourages you to play with it. This is one of the few cars that I've driven where once you have everything turned off, it is so easy to walk up to the limits of this car and kind of teach yourself how to drift, right? That was what the Trueno from Initial D, it was a show about drifting. That's what it was all about. And this car does that ridiculously well, and it does it in a way that you can teach yourself to do it. It's very rare, even for the amount of cars that I get to drive in this line of work, it's very rare that I get a car where I can actually go back to school, so to speak, and practice stuff. I can teach myself trail braking and loading up the front end and unloading the rear end and letting it step out and then trying to dial it out with throttle. It's one of the very few cars that can do that, and it does that really, really well. It breaks away very progressively. It dials itself back in very progressively. They've got the chassis set up such that it's not super tight, like it's not crazy firm. This car still rides really well. But they've dialed it in such a... Okay, maybe not really well, but it rides pretty well for what it is. Like, it's still fairly compliant. And it does a good job taking advantage of the chassis' inherent balance and of the mechanical grip afforded by its suspension layout and by the Michelin Pilot Sport PS4S tires that are on it. Their tweaks to the chassis make for a car that has a natural inkling towards oversteer. It's well balanced, it's not twitchy, spooky, but if you have everything turned off, it will naturally want to step out, but it'll do so in a very progressive way that makes it easy for you to learn how to deal with it and how to approach it. So it can be very rewarding both for someone who's new to performance cars and new to driving fast and new to kind of exploring the limits of adhesion, and it's also really rewarding for someone like me who's done this a lot. And going back to this car is just kind of like a return to form of, oh yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. This is what a really, really excellent chassis is supposed to feel like. It benefits from having a really stiff structure. It's lightweight. The steering is set up very well. It's very natural. It's sharp without being too sharp, without being overeager. It just feels natural and right. It's wonderful. I feel like the tweaks that they've done here will make it more effective for light autocrossing and track work like this car was kind of meant to do, right? It was meant to be that sort of inexpensive, approachable track car. And if you go to any local open lapping, open tracking, autocross type events, you're going to see a ton of these because they are pretty affordable to buy, affordable to operate, and easy to drive fast and easy to learn on. This just does that better. The shocks make it just a little more effective at higher speeds. It feels a little tighter. It's a little more progressive. And then the big Brembo brakes kind of solve one of the only real problems this car had. You know, admittedly, Toyota hasn't done a ton to this, but they didn't need to, right? It already was a fantastic chassis, and now it's just a little more finely honed with the Sachs shocks. And the Brembo brakes solve one of the only problems this car had as a performance car. If you, of course, are unlike me and can get over the ridiculous throttle mapping. Overall, the Toyota GR86 was already a wonderful little sports car, and the tweaks that they've done to this make it just that little bit better, that little bit more rewarding, and a little bit more effective. And I love that Toyota is going to offer this shock and brake package as a standalone option on GR86s moving forward. I think that's fantastic, and it brings it in line with the Mazda Miata with its Brembo Recaro BBS package. I think what Toyota is offering here, especially at this price point, this limited edition car rings up at $39,550, which in the modern context of performance cars is a fantastic value. It's quick, it's so good to drive, and it's reasonably practical. There's a commodious trunk, and there's vestigial back seats. So this car can quite easily be a secondary car or even a primary car. This can be your only car if you're committed to it. And I love the fact that Toyota and Subaru are still committed to building this and offering this kind of experience and iterating on it. It's a great car. It's a wonderful value. I'm super glad it's around and that I got to spend some time with it. And I think the Trueno package is a great little homage to Initial D and the original Sprinter Trueno that has done so much and has had such a huge influence on the world of enthusiast cars. Bear in mind, that show more or less popularized the concept of drifting. It got it off the ground. Enough cannot be said about what that show and what that car did. And this is a pretty cool little send-off to that. So I think that about wraps this up. For DoubleClutch Magazine, I'm Nathan Leipzig. Thanks for watching. Today, I'm taking a look at the 2024 Toyota Corolla. Nope, it's not a Corolla.